Okay, so why don't we get started? Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar featuring neoHome, an invitation-only community dedicated to sustainable futures. For those of you who do not know yet, get stuff done is neoHome's mantra. Their engagement strategy is crucial to achieving their community goals, and this is what we'll be discussing in detail over the next 45 minutes. So let's start with some introductions. I'm Amber. I'm a Senior Customer Success Manager here at Hivebright. I've been with Hivebright for the past 2 years. I'm based in Paris, although clearly I'm an American. I was previously a client of Hivebright's before joining the team. My background is actually in higher education, outreach, engagement, fundraising, and event management. I'm joined by members of neoHome's core team. We have Fiona, neoHome's chief curator, neoHome's co-founders Phil and Ross. To give you some background on them, Ross is, prior to launching Neo with Phil, Ross co-founded the first executive search firm dedicated to climate change and sustainability in 2004. Through his work internationally, he's developed a large network of pioneers shaping more sustainable economies. Phil, our other co-founder, has extensive experience in helping organizations create visions and build strategies to drive value for their businesses and societies as a whole. He has been honored by the Queen for outstanding service to the community, the MBE, and also by the Royal Geographic Society for Leadership and Expeditioning, the FRGS. And then Fiona is a freelance editor, writer, and consultant. She has worked in national newspapers for the past 25 years, most recently as the Wall Street Journal's executive editor for special projects in EMEA. She is neoHome's chief curator, as I mentioned. So to get started, why don't we just ask sort of, a basic question. Please, could you share a bit more about neoHome's mission and why you created this community? Ross?
Sure, happy to. Hi, everybody. The background is that between certainly Phil and I and a couple of the other members of the team, that we built this network over about 20 years of people focused on creating new products, new services from a sustainability perspective. And we got to a point where we figured what happens if we moved from a network to a community, a network being where we're in the middle of everything, to a community where we're not. And that's where the idea for neoHome came from. We've got a network of about 10, 15,000 people internationally, and we're going to slowly bring those into neoHome. But its overall mission is to bring those people together, get out of the way, and spark these projects, new ideas, innovation in our space, and see what happens. But the ultimate goal is for us to be able to look at the map that we have emerging now around the world and see these fires being lit. So that's ultimately what we're about.
And so why did you ultimately decide to go with an online community platform to grow this community? And additionally, what benefits do you find that it's provided?
I mean, the thing that we wanted for a platform was two things. First off, we wanted a technology partner because we wanted somebody who could work with, who we could develop ideas with and co-create things with. We also wanted a platform that had both a physical component to it and a virtual component. Mm-hmm. And so what we wanted to do was not only to have the online community, we wanted to allow people to meet up locally, to start to co-collaborate and so on and so forth. Obviously, that was post-COVID, pre-COVID, and we think now post-COVID, that element is going to be even more important because we're already starting to create these local communities through neoHome. And I think, as Ross said along the way, his words were we kissed a few frogs, and we definitely found some partners some people who were definitely interested in partnering and very inflexible platforms. And so when we started talking to Hivebright, that really had the elements we wanted, that partnering, the physical presence as well as the virtual presence. And so that was the enabler, that two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I mean, I think with COVID, there's definitely, particularly with online communities, there's been benefits as well as drawbacks. You know, obviously this is a pandemic, but for online communities, it also provides a unique opportunity to engage online with so many who are stuck at home. So actually, this helps to raise another question I have. What are some of the specific challenges moving from an informalized network to a more formalized structure of which an online community represents?
Yeah, I've got a list. Not, but to your point, actually, Amber, there on the, you know, us launching this year during COVID, clearly we didn't know this was coming. What we've seen, which will apply to other platforms and communities, is that we've definitely collected a lot of data on the basis of people now editing how they use digital, because they think they're not going to go to a new normal. So they're going to a new normal, but they're not going to go to the old normal, which means great, they're going to have a more balanced life. Some people are going to portfolio careers. Some people are working for organizations who are adapting that and allowing them to work from home. Well, if you're in that position, you're going to want to go to edit those communities that you're going to get most value from. And I think the big thing that we've benefited from is the fact that ours is invitation only and private. So we've seen that, and I'm sure others will see the same. In terms of challenges, that means actually, how do we stand out from the crowd? Yeah. So the plethora of communities are out there. When we first started, we kind of got these sort of first reactions of, well, how is it different to LinkedIn? And actually, I think within weeks that stopped happening. And I think the reason it stopped happening was because they were sick of these platforms and where you're getting a lot of advertising, that they're non-specific subject-wise, that those people aren't qualified. I mean, they may be great people. I'm not just picking on LinkedIn, but if you're going to be hanging out using digital a lot more, then you're going to want to trust those people that you hang out with on the community. And people have come up with great feedback on things like, it's just a great place to ask stupid questions, is one of our favorite bits of feedback. And that tells us that they're using that that they're seeing it as a trusted space. So I think the big challenge is to make sure that it feels like somewhere where they can ask stupid questions, where it's a trusted space. So getting over that. So that helps us distinguish from other platforms. And I suppose also, of course, we're subject-based, topic-based in the sense that we're sustainable futures. Controlling the pace of how you evolve what you're doing. Again, to Phil's point about the reason why we worked with you guys is because you were receptive to our prods, our pushbacks of kind of like, well, it can't do this at the moment. Well, what if it did this? How do you help us at least adapt what you have already? Or how do we help feed into your roadmap of how things might innovate? Pace is important because we've got 10, 15,000 people that we could invite on day one and just see what sticks. Actually, what we've done is that we've invited a number of people, so hundreds of people, not thousands of people at a time, it will be eventually over probably 9 months plus of our base network. And that pace, that control of the pace, allows us to get feedback all of the time, and it ends up being sort of an innovation cycle. So we can do it on the fly. I think that's really important. Many people in the network don't know they're part of a network. So actually managing expectations is really important. So you're about to come into a community. Some people get a bit scared of that. Well, what does it mean? So making sure that expectations are managed about their data, their information, and what's expected of them. We were quite flattered by the fact that people would ask questions about, well, I'm really keen to join, but what do you want from me? You know, what do you want me to get involved? Which wasn't a question we expected. So the challenges there are managing their expectations in terms of how we expected them to behave, but how we expect them to contribute. And then also managing our own expectations, I think, on when you told us lots of times that, look, it could take a year to get the engagement really going. But I think we forgot about that quite quickly. We thought this is our baby. Well, it will be different because we've got a network, you know, and our network, you know, we know them quite well and all that sort of thing. But it really does. You know, that dance floor analogy was a great one. Whoever came up with that, is that nightclubs open, but people have gone and they're having drinks and things, but they haven't hit the dance floor yet.
Yeah.
But I think the secret there is making sure that you have a big enough team to make sure that those engagement grows. And I know Fiona's going to expand on that a lot more. What else was on my list? Communicating the model. People see it and they see the value in it, hopefully quite quickly. But translating that, you know, we're at the moment are free, but we're free to a point where we show value, as in we show projects and ventures that are happening and connections that are happening. But at some point later this year, we're going to charge a subscription. We probably could have done a better job of communicating that this is what's going to happen. We did a pretty good job of that, but I think being very clear about the financial model up front is important. I think that was it. That's on my list. Yeah. Anybody got any of the rest of the team got anything to add on that? Challenges?
I mean, I think just building on your question about business model, is that just to say that just a little stage further is that I think that certainly my background was consultancy, and obviously Ross and I were colleagues in that background as well, and I know Fiona has. You were always taught to be hub and spoke, and fundamentally, I was told never to let people know who was in my contacts book, because that meant they could do deals when I wasn't there, and therefore I'd lose out on that money. So we started neoHome with a very disruptive business model. We wanted to move to a connected model away from the hub and spoke. So what we do with the community when members join is that we don't want to take a cut in anything. If they create value on the community platform, that value is theirs to have. In fact, somebody offered us a percentage on a book deal this week, and we turned that down because they were going to promote it on neoHome and use neoHome to get material. And we said, that's great, you just do that. Because I think, as Ross alluded to, is that what we want to do on neoHome is create value for people, start lots of sustainability fires around the world that would have never been created, and see that as part of our satisfaction. We do want to have a subscription model, but it's going to be a few pounds a month, and that few pounds a month is going to make sure we can pay the licenses and pay all the running costs and pay a bit of our mortgage and all the other good things. But that's broadly what it's about. So if people come on neoHome and create value, start a sustainability project, then we're going to sit back and look at that and be happy about that. I think when we look into the team itself is also a sharing success team. So the team see if when we start creating revenue next year, then the team get a percentage of that revenue. And so everybody shares in success. They share in the growth, or they share in the not growth, depending on obviously how we progress. But we're definitely transparent. Subscription model sometime next year, but the IP that people create is open, and what we hope is that generates lots of things happening, the get stuff done thing, without us having to be involved. So in effect, we're getting out of the way and letting people get on with it, and then neoHome acts as an enabler for that.
It's what you shared. It's interesting because going back to what Ross had mentioned about engagement, I think especially it's over the past 20 years you've already been doing a form of engagement. Essentially, that's the network that you are including here. That has been from a process of engagement over many, many years, which has now allowed you to start this, online community. But as you say, engagement is something that does take some time. It doesn't, especially when you're asking people to come and adapt to a new technology. And, yes, Facebook, LinkedIn, you have all these social media outlets that they're not your competitors exactly, because what you're offering is completely different. But still, you do have people who sometimes feel spread thin across these different ways of interacting with communities. And so you have to keep that in mind. And yes, the value that you're offering to them. I know that you have decided to go with, and we've talked about a community by invitation only community. So ultimately, what was the decision behind that by going by the invitation only community as opposed to just, an open community?
I can say that we're a paradox a little bit, because we start by being completely inclusive in the fact that anybody can join, but they have to be having impact in from a social perspective or from sustainable futures perspective. Our success is not getting to 100,000 users, although we might. The success is around making sure that the value is, because the reason we wanted it to be private is because when people go in there, they take a look around, and because it's been invitation only, when they look around and look at others, which is the way I would look at something, going, okay, who am I going to be hanging out with? They see people that are influential, even in their location. And so that's really important. Without that, you might as well be on one of the other more public platforms. The private, I think, again, especially this year, as people's working lives are changing, I think that's really important. And I think the other thing is not just seeing other individuals and seeing them in a private space, because some of the topic we're in is obviously sustainable futures. By design, people are experimenting. So by design, they want to ask questions that they completely don't know the answer to, but they're of people who would need to be expert, and they want to trust that those are experts in their field. So that's really important. So yeah, the people have just got to be qualified, and private makes a big difference. Again, we've been approached since to join a bigger group, which want to target 1 billion users. So just not our bag, to be honest.
Yeah.
That has a place. But
I think just to build on that is that one of the other things, we had a conversation last night with a potential partner, and he'd been on neoHome, seen somebody ask a question regarding aluminium and recycling aluminium, and he's very connected to the aluminium recycling business in Washington, and then he has spoken over a direct message to the person on neoHome, and now they're having a side conversation about how they could help and support each other.
Right.
The interesting thing is that we've no idea that happened, because we don't see that on neoHome, but how many of those are happening that we don't know about already? And our job is to encourage people to share that story back in, which is what we're working on now, to encourage more people to do that type of thing. And so we're looking at at the responses to the shout outs, at how people are being helped. And so we're already starting to see unknown connections happening, and seeing real value for that, because it was a great conversation. He said it was, superb. We talked to each other. We've got something we want to do together potentially. And we had no idea that would have happened unless we'd have talked to him in a different connection. So it's an amazing place that we've started, and that people are already doing that.
I think one of the things we've learned strategically, our sort of internal narrative about how we're doing, I think did come from you, which was, I always think daily about these 3 pots of engagement, value creation, and membership. And really priorities for that is in that order for us, because if we get the first 2 right, membership's going to grow anyway. Right. But yeah, that's really helpful to us to think about it in those pots. So Phil and I have sort of a steering role on how do we create value. Effectively, how do we show that projects and ventures and connections are actually leading to something. And Fiona's leading on the engagement side, because of course her background in content and then making things happen across connections, etc. Yeah, so those, just the really high level, those 3 things were really, really helpful.
Well, you say you're not sure how large you're going to grow, but I've seen what you've been doing. You're going to grow. I have no doubt about that. So Fiona, I have a question for you. how is your internal team structured? And can you tell us a bit more about your engagement strategy?
Okay, well, actually, we started off, I think both Phil and Ross have alluded to this, that there's a core of 4 of us. There's Phil, Ross, myself as chief curator, and we have Baz, who's network manager. But I think what we haven't mentioned is that there are 9 communities within neoHome. So behavior change, future of work, sustainable finance, climate and energy. So, but we have 9 distinct communities. Obviously there's crossover between them. And when we kicked off, we looked at different structures, different ways of actually not only creating these communities, but how we were going to run them, because there's only a core of 4 of us. So, we can't do all that. We can't keep everything, an eye on all that. And within the existing network, within Phil and Ross's contacts, there were some really leading people, heavyweights in all these different areas. It's sort of how we came up with the different areas, because looking at the network, we were able to sort of more or less break it down, and we came to these nine areas. And so out of these areas, there were leading people, really top level people that we approached, well, Ross and Phil, first of all, approached to be curators, to actually take a specialist interest in each of those communities. So each community has a curation team of about 2 or 3 people, but they're not curators in the normal sense. They're not producing news. They have pretty high level jobs, they're pretty busy people. So they're not curators in the normal sense of producing news all the time, because we're not a news platform. We're facilitating connections. So what they are is they're like community leads. They've created a direction for the community, for each of these communities. And then it's about coming on to engagement. It's about kicking off those conversations with the right level. That's not a conversation that can be found in general media. There's a lot of coverage of sustainability issues, but we wanted it to be just at that higher level. So that's where our curators lie, in sort of leading these communities. From our side, we've tried to actually stimulate that and really pinpoint the content we're producing in the getting stuff done bracket. So we're doing things like talking heads, video series, interviews with, again, people who've actually got stuff done, and we've been asking them, how are you doing it? What's the advice? What are the takeaways for our members? And we also have things like shout outs, which are about requests for help. I'm doing this project. I need this kind of staffing at the moment. We had somebody who's working in developing a hydrogen car and a new sort of ownership model. And he's got to the point where, yes, he can produce the car, he can, he's got all the manufacturing, but actually he was needing people to get out there, but not have an automotive mindset. And he was asking in his shout out, I need this sort of person, but I don't want them to be steeped in the normal automotive, way of thinking. So we've got shout outs, we do roundups every week of who's asking what, if there are questions, tips. But also we didn't want it to be noisy for people. We actually deliberately, not only can I not produce that amount of material to make it noisy, but actually we wanted it to be a quieter space so that it became a trusted space, so that people could have trusted answers and value in the answers. And it's, if they put out a call to ask for help in a certain area, then I'll amplify that in direct communication with people. But it's not bombarding them all the time. Whether that's right or whether that's wrong, we're finding out. We'll get to where, you know, hopefully we're going to get to a point where a lot more happens between existing members, and we're just sort of prodding. We're just throwing the pebble in, and we'll see where the ripples go out. But you know, we need to create an environment with our content that's actually trust first, that people can trust the environment, that then we can inspire through things like talking heads and shout outs, and then we facilitate the interaction. So if we see something, say nobody's responded to a question, then it's my job to spot that, go into all the different communities and say, hey guys, did you see this over there? So that's sort of how I'm approaching, we're approaching the engagement side. I don't know whether Phil, Ross, you have anything, whether you want to sort of say anything more about, you know, future plans or.
Yeah, I think another thing on the back on the team thing. So we end up with a team of, in fact, we've got 35, I think, curators now. So, and obviously we're not paying them; they're not full time. We look after them, but that's a great asset. We looked at about 35 different platforms as well in our research. None of them fueled by Hivebright, I should say. But the biggest problem with them we saw, they were usually people with a reasonable network, but and for instance, people who might do innovation workshops, for instance, and say, okay, wouldn't it be great? We're doing the physical stuff. What if we had a platform? And they would rely on that network once they got onto the platform to interact and then get on with it. As you know, that never happens. So I think that's a big warning shot to anybody looking to create this. You need to find your curators, in our case, or ambassadors, I think you call them. We are going to create ambassadors as well. So in the physical version of Neo, these our chapters that we're creating around, going to create around the world, these fires that we're going to light. Hopefully, we'll have as many ambassadors on the ground, literally, as curators across all the communities as well. Yeah, there was something else I was going to mention. Well, fill in for me while I think of what it was.
I think the unifying factor of across the core team and across the curators and the ambassadors and local chapters is purpose. Is that all of us are unified by the fact that we want to create a more sustainable world, and we'll do that by the getting stuff done. So people are enthused by the getting stuff done rather than talking about it. And I think that through those two things, and the fact that we've not designed this business model that's going to make us super yacht owners, people are motivated by that because they see that we actually want to try and pay our way, but we also want to accelerate that sustainable future because we know what we've got at the moment isn't delivering what we need. And so I think when it comes down to it, that also is a very powerful unifying factor.
Yeah, I think we definitely wanted to take it away from the talking shop. Yeah. It isn't just a talking shop. It's actually somewhere to facilitate projects and ventures. So that's a very key area for us. Yeah. So
yeah, because on the future development bit, one thing that we've got plans to really polish is the show don't tell bit. It's the look front and center. This is what's happening, and also then almost incentivizing people to do the same independently of us, but also helping them, give them the first nudge about, look, this is kind of how you do it. So what we're obviously developing with you some ideas around how people, we call them shout outs and then help outs. So that trade, that exchange, so that we can really feature that, because ultimately that's what people want to get on and do.
Right.
They don't want to read more stuff. They can read more stuff even though our stuff is very good because we've got good people. But they publish elsewhere too. So that's not the reason to come to us. It's to help connect, to get stuff done, whether that's a project or a venture. But at this stage, as we gather more people as members, we need to land on there and see what's happening. And I think our next part of the evolution is to really showcase that.
Well, in listening to you, I mean, I heard certain things that really resonated. This idea of it's clear that you know what your values are, but your approach at sometimes you're willing to test and try different things because the values are always the same, but the approach you're willing to be flexible and pivot there. As well as it seems like you're really clear on your bandwidth and what you can do and what you can't do, which is why I think because you put a lot of thought and intentionality there, I think that you are doing as well as you are. I mean, you're currently your community is actually doing quite well, especially for a community that technically didn't exist before. With that said, let me ask what, for your internal leadership team, what sort of expectations have you set, and what are your benchmarks for success?
I think we're likely to be different because we're not about number of members per se. That's not top of our list.
Right.
Our expectations and our sort of targets are around showing that things are happening, and we talk about kind of an internal feel. At what point will we ask for subscriptions? Just when, if we were a member, does it feel like we would get value? Yeah. And that's probably not a great thing to pass on to others because people are more likely to have stronger metrics than that. But that's ultimately when we can show in those three pots again: engagement, value creation, yes, and then membership. Would we pay X pounds a month or whatever we're going to be charging for that? And I would say, in any case, the way that we've gone about it, I don't know whether because of the way we've gone about it, it's opened up other opportunities for us, is that we're in conversations with corporates that want to take up this private room idea that we already have as a feature. So that's, whilst we're all in this to make money, and it doesn't sound like we're going to make millions and millions of pounds if we only charge X amounts a month, although it'll tick over very nicely. Having something like private room and other ideas that will come where we can charge other additional sort of bespoke services for is in the pipeline. So that will come. So I think they're sort of marks of success. But yeah, I don't think ours is, I'd share it with the other guys, but I don't think we have perhaps a template, perhaps a more traditional thing like getting to a certain number of members. We've got internal soft ones where we know we'll be 1,000 people by spring, and we're on track that. But again, that goes back to kind of controlling the pace and the point you just made about kind of innovating on the fly and adding these features and evolving it. We couldn't do that if we didn't control the pace. We'd just end up looking a bit stupid and clunky, and so.
I think.
When I see what we're doing now with each of the communities is actually encouraging almost a project per community. What can we do that will be of most value in that community? And I'm seeing we've got about 3 or 4 projects now coming, just starting to build with individual communities. And when I see that happening across all 9, and then when I see one finish and another start, then I'll know that we're absolutely on the right track. That's it.
The only other thing I'd say, with regard to expectations, obviously we talk to each other and we set ourselves internal goals, and there's a couple of questions already come up about engagement in the chat. Is that it's not all perfect, is that we have 2 team calls a week, and I would say the first thing on the agenda of each of those calls is engagement. And how do we drive engagement? Because our hope is we've created this amazing, the analogy we always use is a party. We've created this party where everybody's on the dance floor dancing some really cool music, and they're not in the kitchen, drinking glasses of wine and and just talking to each other. And you know, we're not there yet, and our goal is to get there. And so all of our meetings are about experimentation. What could we try? I mean, we had one last night where we were quite tough on each other. You know, Ross was coming up with an idea and we're going, well, you know, really not sure that's a good idea. And, you know, and all that type of stuff. So we are, you know, this isn't some sort of thing where we're all like sitting back in armchairs saying how great we are. You know, we are a bit harsh on each other sometimes. And so, but that experimentation is definitely something that we do, because there is just never going to be one silver bullet. We know that.
That is, yeah. How to engage? That's always the $1 million question.
Yeah.
If there was some silver bullet, then you know, you'd have universities, institutions, public institutions, you know, that would definitely be paying, you know, top dollar just to be able to answer that question, which many do actually. That's actually leads to my next question. As your community grows, do you find that your original expectations for the community have not matched reality? And so, I mean, you've talked a bit, you've talked about this a bit already, but what are some of the learnings from that? What would you have done differently, if anything?
It's interesting. What we have done differently.
I would actually say one thing here. I suppose my expectation actually with the curators, because I think also COVID just threw in problems that we weren't expecting. So actually to expect the level of engagement from the curators, probably I was a bit off the scale, and I had to bring those expectations down and revisit them, because everybody was so pressured because of the pressures of COVID. So it was like, okay, how do we make this work on a simpler level, so that it became about achievable goals with them? So that was definitely one thing, but I think that was also very driven by COVID.
One thing we haven't said that we did do, and this isn't answering the question directly, it's not something we would do differently. One thing I thought that we haven't mentioned that I thought was good was that we did 6 or 8 weeks beta test, didn't we? And with just 50 people that knew as well, and got them to break it, and just grab friends in. And you know, I happen to have somebody who works for a bank on user experience on their digital products, and you know, just people just mess around with it. That was invaluable. We did that, you know, being patient to do that for 6 weeks or so, meant that when we did go out to the people we knew, that we knew there wasn't going to be nasty surprises. But yeah, I think that's probably something you haven't mentioned yet.
I think the thing that I do, the thing is, don't be too hard on yourself. Is that I think everybody thinks their baby is the most beautiful baby in the world, and they can't understand why they don't believe that, you know. And I really still, even though people tell you that they're not going to engage in all this, and when they don't, you get really annoyed, you know, that they don't do it. And so maybe just you know, curbing your expectations over engagement. But I think the other thing is that I think the biggest thing we talk about is that when we're starting it, it's like spinning a big flywheel. And so we're having to do a lot of the heavy lifting to get this flywheel going. And what we hope is that we get that flywheel spinning at some point next year, as Ross said and Fiona said, with the value creation. And when people see that value creation, they take over some of the heavy lifting. But we're doing lots of things at the moment: shout outs, help outs, neo-sponsored projects. We're doing roundups. We're now going to start phoning people up. When they join, we're going to offer them a 20-minute induction one-to-one on Zoom, so we can then, you know, show them around and explain to them what it's about. So we're going to do that, and we copied that off Apple, because Apple have just started doing that with their products now. So if you buy an Apple product, you can book a time slot with an Apple person, And so we're now we've carved out Wednesday, and we've set particular times on Wednesday when we can talk. And then when people join, we're going to use one of the emails in the system that when they've been on there, we then send them an email and say, would you like to have a chat? And then talk them through it. And again, what we think is some of these things are quite viral. So even though we might do it to one, somebody else might talk to somebody else about it, who talks to somebody else about it. So even though you might have one conversation, that's the same as having a conversation with 3 to 5 people. So we hope through that will be another thing. But it's continual prototyping, continual experimentation, and not getting disheartened by the fact that people don't think your baby's beautiful.
Yeah, but that's a really good point. But there's something about getting something out of every call. So actually, that is not lost time. That time that we're committing, it might be 4, 5, 6 hours each, even up to a week. I wouldn't be afraid to do that. But make sure you get. So you're obviously giving the time to instruct people, to get them to engage more, which obviously is value for us. But we're putting a face to what goes on behind the scenes and us as individuals, I guess. But also get from them what we call our shout outs. Who do you want to be connected to? Use that time to say, okay, and we're assuming that we're doing these 20-minute conversations on Zoom. So just quickly record. So look, record a 1-minute shout out, and we'll put it out so that shows more interaction. And then the other bit on the end of those, we're going to be asking, well, how else do you think you should join? What other your peers do you think would want to get benefit out of neoHome too? So in 20 minutes, you've engaged them, you've made them feel sort of that they belong, and we've said hi. We've maybe even done a shout out, and they've referred a few people of their colleagues that we can invite. So it's time well spent.
Yeah, that's that's actually that high touch approach, I think, is really interesting. I had read an article on Medium where he's talking about your engagement strategy, and this particular writer was using the idea of a dance party, and he said, if you have a party and you invite people in, do you not go and say hello to them? Do you not introduce yourself? If you don't know, maybe a friend of a friend brought them. Of course, you want to have a good party, then you make sure that you make people feel welcomed, you make sure you introduce yourself, and you make sure to reach out to them and talk to them, and you go and see every single guest. So what you're describing essentially sounds very much like that to me. To ensure that they know who you are, because putting a face to who you are, I mean, you are, I understand you're getting out of the way, but at the same time, you still represent this community as well. And so it's putting a face to that.
Yeah, it's great benefit in that.
So we just being conscious of time, because we're actually supposed to be ending in 1 minute, and I would like to take at least 2 questions. So I'm going to move over to the questions section. So I have a question here from Sam. He says, I work in the events industry, which is heavily hit at the moment. We tried building communities about 10 years ago and did not work. We just couldn't get people to engage. What do you think has changed in the past 10 years, and why do you think people are more open to this type of technology?
I think people are more digital savvy, aren't they? Used to running their lives on mobile, and the idea of communities now, I mean, well beyond Facebook, professional communities online are much more prevalent than 10 years ago. And because of that competitiveness, a great deal of them have to show value, like we've learned. So as long as you can show that value, I think that's going to help. But the events industry is going to come back in the same way that we're going to be doing. We exist to do the real life meetups as well. And that digital side of what we do is only the enabler. It's not the last destination. Their scenario seems the opposite. So I think we are in a time completely different to 10 years ago. And look at how people are behaving in terms of work now because of COVID this year. So if they can make the events more fine-tuned, because they've created a digital platform, so the digital platform gathers the right people who will end up at the event, it's probably the right way to do it.
I think the thing that I would add just with us is that people like the invitation only private curated platform. And I think that's what they're looking for, because I think some of the people who have come in as members with us have not had good experiences with open platforms. And so I would be, if I was giving one piece of advice to Sam, is I would say, rather than think about, making it open to everybody, try and bring it as a community so people feel safe and that they can actually start to contribute without thinking that something bad is going to happen to them. And that's certainly what people have found on neoHome, that they feel safe.
Yeah. I certainly agree with both of you. I think that the events industry is going nowhere. It's just going to, the way it'll look might be a little different as we move forward, as life in general. 10 years ago, people were not online the way they are now. So, it will just continue to evolve, and events will just be a part of that. So then just one more question. How did you narrow down to 9 sub-communities?
With great difficulty.
The way I describe it is, so we cut the top of our 10,000 plus network and peered in and looked at where the expertise were, because at the end of the day, if we had communities where we don't have people with expertise, there's no point having it. But yeah, we did battle with, in our industry, there's the UN Sustainable Development Goals, of which there are 17. We could have just chosen those, but we think that's lazy. We've clearly defined those as areas where we know we've got great people across all different stakeholder groups that can answer questions and projects and ventures and things in those 9 areas. However, we have given ourselves the space to, we might be 15 in years to come. We haven't had that much pushback on why isn't there X or why isn't there Y or where does this fit yet, which is interesting. But we're prepared to add other communities. So that's how we did it. And obviously by topic.
Okay, I see we have a couple other questions, but I think that those will have to be answered via email. So first, I just want to say thank you all. I have the joy of actually speaking to you on a regular basis, but thank you for coming on and sharing your own insights and experience so far. I know that neoHome is going great places, and if nothing else, just because I've seen it. So thank you all for joining. Spencer, did you want to say something before we close off?
Yes, thanks, Amber. Hi, everybody. Spencer Dorsett, Director of Marketing for Hive Bright North America here. I just wanted to again say thank you to Amber for hosting today, and to Fiona, Phil, and Ross for being willing to share their experience and expertise with us. As you saw in the chat, we have a link in there for a very brief survey we'd love to ask you to complete, to just give us your thoughts on today's webinar and any potential thoughts you might have for future webinars. We use this to make these better for your time and your use. So if you have any thoughts, please share them. And anybody who completes that survey will receive a $5 Starbucks gift card. Other than that, thank you to everybody who was able to attend and participate today. And we look forward to seeing you again on a future webinar.
Okay, cheers, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.